first for this tournament that we've had so far. Well, let's see what these teams got in store for us as Reload, Fulcrum, and Obey Alliance square off in game number 1 here in the other side.
All right, I really like their logo. It's really good looking for Reload Fulcrum here as they go into that first game. So it looks like no Horde, unfortunately, just full alliance on this MDI, as we do see the Paladin is playing Dwarf. So we see 4 Night Elves and 1 Dwarf on the side of Reload Fulcrum. We do see a very similar skip by both of the teams, actually skipping that first trash pack and just pulling the pack on the left side.
Here comes the Ashen Hollow, first global for Reload Fulcrum. Then they immediately use the Urn to be able to stun up all these mobs. On the side of Obey Alliance, they have something a little bit similar. But honestly, the Holy Paladin kind of carrying damage right here for Reload Fulcrum, 20k DPS. They finished their first pack just a little bit faster. Huh.
Where's the Moonkin? The Moonkin just like...
He had to click the
anyway.
urn. Leave him alone.
True.
He had to click the urn.
True, that is... But yeah, the Paladin was basically doing... The Paladin was doing the Moonkin damage. The Paladin was basically just... doing the damage dealer's job. But anyway, we're moving on. As the Reload Fulcrum actually did a really good job dealing with this first trash pack. They're now gearing up to do that second pull. And we actually see that Moonkin did save his cooldowns, of course, as there was no need to use that on the first. And that's a really big pull, as we can see Reload Fulcrum just gathering up everything on that left side. Obey Alliance doing a very similar thing, just gathering everything up on that left side in the water.
Interestingly enough, the priest, the Shadow Priest on the side of Reload Fulcrum, is actually playing Night Fae. So he will have those Fae Guardians to be able to help him get like either CDR on Void Eruption, or potentially even put those get the CDR to the mage, which may be more beneficial than helping himself out in this situation. But he's actually not doing bad damage. So Shadow got a little bit of a rework as to how they do AoE coming into this expansion. A lot of their AoE damage is like stacked cleave now. You normally think of Shadow as like a dot spec, but now they have a lot of stacked cleave damage with the Searing Nightmare talent and like their Mind Seer. So that's actually a big point of something that you need to be watching out for is like the Shadow Priest is only really able to do damage if the mobs are stacked pretty close to one another. But right now, it looks like Reload Fulcrum is neck and neck with Obey Alliance in terms of progression through the dungeon, both having their first Pride spawn. Reload Fulcrum is going to get their first Pride down a little bit ahead of Obey Alliance.
Yeah,
I would say this is kind of surprising.
Yeah, they actually did a really good job dealing with the trash incredibly quickly. They also had a lot of single target damage, which that's really like the Holy Paladin. First of all, they have a lot of single target damage. That's what we've seen before as well. The strength of that class. And then we also see, Moonkins also do a lot of single target damage, and Shadow Priest as well. So maybe that's really something where they can get ahead. Now, we do see another big pull come in by both of the teams as they gather up everything on top of this urn, and they just nuke down everything. Now, explosive can be an issue when they do this huge pull, so you definitely want to make sure you keep an eye on that. It's usually the healers that deal with it, so maybe the Moonkin on Reload Fulcrum side, because the Paladin usually does more damage, so maybe it's the Moonkin who's...
Stop talking.
I'm just kidding.
You're gonna make people stop inviting us again, man. But yeah... Reload Fulcrum actually ends up getting their 36% enemy forces count. They dealt with their Urn pull a lot faster than Obey Alliance, and that comes off the back of the pack being just stacked up a little bit better for that of Reload Fulcrum. And they also had stuff like PI from the Shadow Priest who got put on the Fire Mage there. The Mage was able to kind of pop off. Reload Fulcrum starting off with a pretty early lead. The Ashen Hollow should be coming up in probably like 35 more seconds. So I wonder where the second usage of that would be. I think it's best used probably on trash, especially very large trash pulls. But at the same time, it can be used for really high single target boss damage because it gives Holy Paladin access to that Hammer of Wrath ability. So I think that after this Manifestation of Pride, Reload Fulcrum and Obey Alliance are probably going to go into Dealer Zaeva if I had to speculate. Reload Fulcrum, like Nagura said, is probably going to just kill this first boss orders of magnitude faster than Obey Alliance.
Yeah, and if you really think about it, right, the trash is dying so quickly because it is tyrannical. Sort of the trash is not being buffed, And there's just a lot of the trash having very little HP, especially in this Night Fae area. Everything is just being cleaved down. So if the mage is enough for you to deal with this, then sometimes it's just better to have more single target damage, because that's what's going to be holding you back the most. And we can see it right now for Reload Fulcrum as they're reaching the boss first, and they're going to be having more single target damage for sure. You can see the Moonkin now finally showing off the damage that he can do with all of those cooldowns being popped. I mean, look at the amount of damage coming out of the Moonkin and the Holy Paladin with the Bloodlust and the Pride. Just huge amounts of single target damage just melting the boss.
Yeah, and now the mage has his combustion up, is utilizing that. Like, they have 4 people right at 10k DPS, where if you look on the side of Obey Alliance, they only have one player above 10k DPS. So there's going to be an absolutely massive differential in terms of just like time to kill on this boss, and that's going to be their advantage. Like, they may end up being able to kill stuff like Hakar 1 blood barrier faster because of this damage gain on the instance as a whole. They may be able to kill stuff like Moizala just a little bit faster just because of the single target damage gain. However, Obey Alliance definitely has a significantly higher cleave profile just in general, but the cleave part of the dungeon is kind of over. I would actually say that this is a really good spot for Reload Fulcrum, as long as they can continue to do the most meta of pulls. I think that's the biggest issue that I'm seeing. And like, whenever you look at their time trial time, they're approximately 3 minutes behind that of Obey Alliance. So I am moderately concerned with their ability to be able to do the meta pulls on the back half of the dungeon. But the front little bit of the dungeon, which I think would be argued is the hardest part, Reload Fulcrum has looked really solid and are taking a commanding lead.
Yeah, and I mean, as you're saying, if they're not doing the same amount of like meta pulls as Obey Alliance, they still might even have a chance to catch up, because they're saving so much time on the bosses, right? So if they save an insane amount of time on the bosses because of the extra single target damage that they have, I mean, look at the Paladin's damage. He actually was #1 on that boss fight. He beat all of the other damage dealers with that insane single target burst. Wow, crazy. As they're now fighting this Enraged Spirit. Yes. Now, this Enraged Spirit, one more thing that we didn't talk about yet is that they actually have a Soothe. They can actually dispel the raging, while Obey Alliance cannot. So when Obey Alliance deals with this Enraged Spirit, they will have to stop damage and have the rage cast go through before the mob reaches 30%, because they can't get rid of that, and then they're just gonna die to the rage cast if it's raged as well from the affix. So Reload Fulcrum doesn't have to do any damage stops. They can just soothe it off with the druid, and that's just saving a little bit extra time again.
Exactly. I mean, on top of that, they do also have some additional killing power on things like these warlords. The warlords have like an undying rage effect that can also be soothed off for like via an enraged dispel. So that there could potentially be some time saved there. But right now, you do see Reload Fulcrum is electing to just skip all of this trash. They pulled the warlords away since they don't have 5 melds on their comp. This is just something that they need to do to make sure that the Paladin is able to get through. Now they elect to pull the Defunct Dental Drill. Obey Alliance starting to catch back up a little bit. You see Skylark is grabbing all these Bone Soldiers, doing a similar pull to what we saw from Reload Fulcrum. And Obey Alliance is actually starting to catch back up a little bit in terms of just time through the instance.
Yeah, definitely. As they're now dealing with this, this mob is actually pretty annoying for them because they have to line of sight the AoE cast. So definitely losing a little bit of time with this one, but they can pull some more trash on top at the very end. So this is pretty efficient, as you can see that the AoE is being casted in the back, and while the AoE is being channeled line of sight, they're just gathering up the next pull. So definitely saving some seconds there as well. And there's a full moon being dropped by the Moonkin. Big full moon as he's popping the cooldowns. Wow.
Let's go. All right. Now being punished for dropping the full moon, getting stunned by the Arf Arf. But you do see that Soothe coming out on the Arf Arf, allowing the tank to take way less damage from those metallic jaws while they were enraged. It could be pretty scary. So this is a part of the dungeon that we actually see a lot of groups elect to skip. And they're skipping it with like invisibility potions. Look at Reload Fulcrum right there. They all pop their invis pot. They immediately run through. Now their Druid, since he can re-stealth with Prowl, immediately turns off all of those slimes with the engineering, and now they're the rest of the group, since they want to stay in invisibility potion, doesn't do anything. The Moonkin makes their way through the instance. Now they grab the double lubricator. They may pull it into the essential oils. It really just kind of depends. We've seen a lot of groups actually pull the lubricators in the essential oils, but with this comp, it's kind of scary. They don't have a ton of kicks. They do have like a Solar Beam and a Silent Sigil, which is really nice. But you see, the Moonkin goes down. This is so bad. They don't. He is their battle res too, so they do have access to engineering battle res, but it takes a little bit of time to be able to get him back up. It looks like they are electing to not do it, but the Lubricator gets off a full self-cleansing cycle. Okay, now the Moonkin gets res. You do see the Solar Beam coming out, but the Lubricator is going to cost them a little bit more time. While on the side of Obey Alliance, they're starting to catch back up a little bit, more and more. They're just starting to edge their way back into the game. They're getting ready to pull the Essential Oils with the double Lubricator as well. I would say that they have a decent amount more cleave AoE damage to where they're not super worried about this pack taking too long, but at the same time they need to make sure that these sentient oils get kicked, the lubricators get kicked on their self-cleansing cycle, stuff like that. So now Reload Fulcrum is about to start the Mana Storm fight, but taking a second to talk about what exactly they want to do, maybe waiting a few moments for a couple of cooldowns, and now they engage the encounter. I would say about 30 seconds ahead of where Obey Alliance is right now.
This was actually just so close with Reload Fulcrum because as the Moonkin accepted the res, he soothed the Lubricator, who was enraged by the affix and just didn't get interrupted on the Lubricate cast. So if he didn't soothe, that was his first global as soon as he got rest. If he didn't dispel that, the Lubricate would have went through and probably even killed the whole group. So that was actually incredibly clutch by the Moonkin getting that soothe up because they didn't have an interrupt for it. As they're now fighting that first boss, as you said, just slightly ahead, even with the 5 seconds disadvantage here because of that death they had, definitely still ahead in the dungeon. So this is actually incredibly impressive by Reload Fulcrum because Obey Alliance definitely the favorites in this matchup, right? They're the veterans here, and they're the ones that were expected to win this. Also looking at the time trial times, because this is a time trial dungeon. Obey Alliance did a lot better in that ranking in the time. So seeing that Reload Fulcrum is doing so well until now is actually just very, very impressive. As we also see another Convoke being popped by the Moonkin here, just making sure getting some more boss damage out. And yeah, this boss can cause some issues, but looks like both of the teams are having doing a good job so far.
Yeah, I do actually think the burst single target is a really strong suit for Reload Fulcrum, where like the sustained single target of like the Windwalker, and then like less sustained single target from like the DK, but I think the DK's cooldowns whenever he does in fact have like Army and DT together is really good. But Reload Fulcrum still, again, pretty ahead on the Mana Storms. They need to make sure that Millhouse dies in this cycle. This is actually really important. I don't suspect that they're going to have too many problems with getting Millhouse down, but he did start a lot higher in terms of health coming into this phase than you'd see from Obey Alliance. Obey Alliance had Millhouse down to 32%, where Reload Fulcrum was at 41%, just due to the burst single target damage profile that they have. And like, okay, so Maleficent is at 34% for Reload Fulcrum, where it's a little bit higher for that of Obey Alliance. So it kind of shows you the difference in the single target damage profiles between the two teams. Now Reload Fulcrum is on to Maleficent. They are, man, they're actually going to be a decent amount ahead in terms of boss damage and just killing this first boss. But we'll be able to see if Obey Alliance actually is able to try to clutch back whenever you look at those splits down at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, and we did see Obey Alliance do this pull at the very, very end on the last boss, where they pulled a bunch of trash into the last boss phase after the intermission. And that is really something that if they pull it off again, it's going to save them quite a lot of time if Reload Fulcrum is not going to be doing something like that. Now, it looks like they did pull the Pride on Reload Fulcrum's side. I'm not sure. This looks like it was not intended because the Demon Hunter was already like almost all the way out as they engaged this Pride. So this might have been a mistake because they did skip this Pride earlier with the invisibility potion. So maybe they wanted to just go past, but somehow aggroed it. Not sure. We've already seen a similar mistake happen by another team earlier. So yeah, maybe this is actually gonna cost them quite a bit.
This is so bad for them. So they were only approximately 30 to 25 seconds ahead coming out of the Mana Storm fight, and now while fighting this Pride, look at that Pride buff just go to waste. They may end up getting like some value of it, but it's not enough to like justify actually fighting that mob. Look at everybody who's just like skipping those warlords even. Oh my gosh, now the Holy Paladin's in combat and he doesn't have a meld. This is really bad for them. Obey Alliance, though? Yeah, he accidentally got into combat with it. So now Obey Alliance here, is starting to look like they're back in the driver's seat, continuing to play their own game. 0 deaths on the board for them. They do end up pulling that trash pack, but I suspect that they're just going to group meld everything off. Okay, so the Holy Paladin actually sacks himself into the trash pack, and they're going to update. Okay,
so here's what release.
Yeah, they're updating the checkpoint for the death. So he's immediately able to just res and walk in here. But that's actually pretty costly in time. Not the death itself, but the fighting of the Pride. They were only 45 seconds ahead, right? But they're actually like 30 seconds ahead after the Mana Storm fight. But now they're, I would actually describe them as behind just due to the unfortunate circumstances of pulling that Pride, where Obey Alliance just skipped the Pride.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing. The problem is also that if you accidentally pull this Pride, then you can't even do anything with the buff. You see, they engaged this trash pack once the buff was gone. So that's a big issue. They couldn't even capitalize on the buff. They just had to kill the Pride, and then didn't even do anything with the buff. The Paladin going down, they had to wait until he's back, run all the way to this Hakar area. And yeah, just a huge amount of time lost, unfortunately. As Obey Alliance is already doing that, their second trash pull, they basically split this whole area into 2 pulls. Reload Fulcrum doing something very similar, but they're still dealing with their first pull as they have to finish off this priest, and now they're engaging the second pull. And they're also 10 seconds behind because of those 2 deaths. So that was really, really costly for them. Obey Alliance have to deal a little bit with that raging, as we can see Skylark just jumping around, kiting the raging out. But yeah, definitely in favor of Obey Alliance now.
Yep. So now Reload Fulcrum here, using their urn to be able to stun up a bunch of these mobs. Obey Alliance is finishing off their trash pack that will spawn their 4th Pride of the instance. It looks like they were going to... I think they may have actually tried to Invisibility Potion off the Pride. Well, actually, Invis-Potting off the Pride here wouldn't even make sense, so I doubt that they were even trying to do that. But they looked like they were positioning themselves in a kind of strange way. Fighting this Pride, getting ready to take that Prideful buff into Hakar. On the side of Reload Fulcrum, their Shadow Priest does go down. He immediately reses up, though. It looks like they're just starting to run out of gas in terms of damage on this pack. This is definitely one of the downsides of this comp too, is while Obey Alliance is definitely going to have more killing power, especially for a lot of these pulls. Reload Fulcrum is like a pretty burst-heavy profile, but once they're out of the burst, then they're just kind of down for the count, right? They literally just completely run out of damage, and you see all these mobs sitting in that raging, kind of beating on the tank. They do get their Pride spawned, so this is actually okay for them, but Obey Alliance, I would describe them as like 45 seconds ahead now. So their Hakar Wing, Obey Alliance's, has slingshot them really far into the lead over Reload Fulcrum.
Yeah, they did have a difficult time actually finishing up that Pride because none of the damage dealers wanted to use the offensives because Hakar needs all of the damage you can somehow bring. So they now use the Bloodlust, they have the Pride, they're using all of those offensives to just drop this boss low. You can see the boss is still only at 40% after all of this initial burst, so they're gonna have to deal with that Blood Barrier a little bit. Now the Blood Barrier does AoE damage, and the more damage the boss actually does with the AoE, the higher the shield actually is. And not only does it damage your group, it also damages the suns of Hakar that are still up. So if you're completely ignoring the suns, the shield will be bigger. That's why you want to make sure that if the suns are respawning, you want to make sure you deal with them before the Blood Barrier spawns. And if you have any sort of immunities or the damage reduction, then the Blood Barrier also will be smaller because you're taking less damage from the AoE, and therefore the shield will be smaller.
But here comes Reload Fulcrum, popping their Bloodlust, all of their offensive CDs, Ashen Hollow.
Look at that damage.
They're actually smoking this boss. What is happening, man? They're actually going to have...
Where did it go?
The boss is dead! Okay, they're unfortunately not going to have any cooldowns from Moisala, but they killed that boss in 25 seconds, man. If they didn't have that minor lob of a play accidentally pulling that Pride, they would be so far ahead of Obey Alliance. It is unfortunate that what is happening right now. Reload Fulcrum and Obey Alliance neck and neck. They need to get 15% enemy forces count, which from what we've seen from a lot of teams, they're going to start Moisala right now. Then they're going to pull the final 15% enemy forces count that they need into the last platform of the boss, right? So they'll kill some of these trash right here. You see Obey Alliance immediately pulling the Death Speaker, looking to potentially pull some of the trash from the boss. It really just depends on how comfortable the tank is with this boss, because the boss's melees are rather dangerous. He does a considerable considerable amount of tank damage, and with the raging effects, you have to be kind of careful. But now the trash starts to get pretty low. Now they elect to pull the boss. On the side of Reload Fulcrum, they're starting to get stuff down too. It'll be interesting because Moisala has been engaged for Obey Alliance. Reload Fulcrum needs to go now if they want a chance to be able to get back in it. Because not only do they have, they're behind in terms of time in the dungeon, but they're also 3 deaths differential, so 15 seconds behind as well.
Yeah, they needed to pull. They are pulling now, but it might just be too little too late.
Bro.
Now we do know they have more single target damage, right? But one thing is as well, they have pretty long cooldowns on their single target damage, right? You can see the Celestial Damage is a 3-minute cooldown. So if they don't have those huge cooldowns for the buff that they get from finishing the totems, then they might not actually be faster. So that's really something they have to keep in mind. Sometimes for the intermission phase, when you deal with those mirror images, you can actually use less cooldowns to save some more cooldowns for the boss, because on these 18 tyrannical keys, you don't one-shot the boss immediately with the haste buff. It usually, we've seen the MDI teams get the boss down to like 14%, 15%, so they still have to do 4 to 5%. Oh no! We see Shay going down, unfortunately, for Reload Fulcrum here. Doppler did get the rest back up, but that's just another 5 seconds on the board, and this is so close for them as Obey Alliance is already in that intermission phase.
Oh, this is not great. Okay, so fortunate enough for both sides, this is tyrannical. Moisala's images are scaled by tyrannical, so there is a chance that one group would potentially miss the kill on the image. More likely than not, it could be that tank healer duo. Looks like Obey Alliance does get theirs down, immediately clicks that totem. Clicking the totem, an integral part of this. I've definitely been in a point where I've forgotten to click the totem before. Not great for you. All right, so now Obey Alliance has the final difficult part of this instance. They are grabbing the remainder 8% of enemy forces that they need for the instance and pulling it straight into the haste buff that they have. This is pretty dangerous tank damage, but for the rest of the group, the trash should die relatively quickly just due to that massive haste buff that Wansamdi grants you.
The boss is still on 17%, so that's still quite a lot for them to chew through, while also having to finish off this trash pack. And remember, they don't actually have a Sooth for this Risen Warlord. They're just gonna have to cut it out until the debuff is gone. Looks like they did manage to finish it off. And we can see on Reload Fulcrum's side, they're doing the same thing, but they actually have more boss damage. As you can see, the boss is down to 70% as well. These 20 seconds are just gonna be the problem for Reload Fulcrum here. And the Pride buff that they mispulled, that's actually the one thing that cost them the most amount of time, in my opinion, because they also couldn't really make anything with that buff. That was so unfortunate that they pulled that there mistakenly. But yeah, you can see how close this still is in the HP of the boss. Both of them having the trash down. Actually, Obey Alliance still having one of those cultists that they have to deal with. And it looks like Reload Fulcrum missing 2%. So they didn't pull the 2 mobs that are at the entrance, possibly.
They're still waiting. There's 2 mobs at the top of the stairs that they need.
Yeah, but they should have pulled it into the haste buff. Interesting that they decide to just either do it later. They don't want to spawn the Pride.
They should have pulled it by now so they can continue to cleave it down.
Yeah.
But they're still stalling. You saw Holo walk up and like tag the 2 mobs that you end up needing. It's like a cultist and a bone raptor, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And you would see that like a little bit earlier, but right now, Obey Alliance, all they need is 2% more on Moisala and that Risen Cultist. Of course, the 20 seconds of death differential is why this isn't exactly the most nail-biter. But overall, this has looked pretty good for Reload Fulcrum. I will say that they exceeded expectations in terms of what I thought was going to happen. Obey Alliance, though, does get the boss down, does get the trash down, and takes the first map of the series.
That's right, Obey Alliance taking that victory. I think you really nailed it on that one, Tettles, where, like you said, it wasn't the biggest of nail-biters between the 2 of them because of those deaths, because there's some still % missing, but Reload Fulcrum definitely putting up a good fight against Obey Alliance in this one. What do you think, Tranos?
Yeah, I mean, Reload Fulcrum here were several minutes ahead of their trial time, and they've shown up in a big way in this map. And I think this shows that we're in for a great series, actually, between these 2 teams, because that game was close. It was really, like, if that Pride being pulled was not part of the plan, that could easily have explained almost all of the difference between the 2 teams. A couple of deaths here or there, but there were a lot of ways that Reload Fulcrum's plan looked really, really, really solid. The damage they were pumping out there with the Holy Paladin, oh my goodness, that looks incredible.
Yeah, I think kind of doubling down and kind of circling back to a lot of their time trial dungeons to make sure that they're optimizing them even further. Also, just kind of shows how well Reload Fulcrum's been prepared for this as well. I think, Nagura.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredibly impressive. Just a few mistakes here and there. Not even so. The deaths didn't cost them as much time. The Pride mispulling that one definitely cost them the game, probably. But it's just so nice to see that they're the number 8 seed, right? And this is a team, Obey Alliance, that has been around for so long. They're a veteran team. They have been competing for forever, and they've been getting the number 2 spot in the NA region before almost every single cup. So it's incredible to see that that's such a close game between those two.
Yeah, most definitely. Adrados, what do you got for us on this replay here?
Yeah, so hats off to Obey Alliance for a great, smooth, and fast run. I want to mostly focus, though, on the Reload Fulcrum side of things. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff that they were able to make work really well. Starting really at the start of the dungeon, even not the very, very first pull of the dungeon with the huge damage and healing coming out from Ashen Hallow. The fact that they were then, without their cooldowns, able to still make big pulls in the Ardenwold Wing work. And look at the damage that they were able to pump out here with that Pride buff on the wings, on the Ashen Hallow, on their Holy Paladin here. Ended this fight as the top damage dealer, just completely melting Dealer Zyxa. And that wasn't the only boss that they did this to. They also ended up doing this to Hakar. The combination of the Ashen Hallow, the Bloodlust, and the Pride, really, really insane with all the burst damage, not just of their Holy Paladin, but of their Moonkin as well. Their Moonkin, another difference in their choice compared to the standard here. And honestly, this looked really, really good. The damage they were able to pump out looked incredible. However, Obey Alliance did end up winning the game with their kind of the strategy that we saw out of them was smooth the whole way through. And they ended up doing that last boss with all the trash, with more trash than Reload Fulcrum was able to do on the last boss, with the ones from the top of the stairs coming in as well, saving even more time there. A great run from Obey Alliance, but really, again, hats off to Reload Fulcrum for not only having a great run, but doing it their own way.
Yeah, and we've gotten very comfortable, I think, with this meta of this is what everybody runs, Tettles, this is what we're going to have, this is what we're going to expect. But I think in a lot of cases, we've been able to see that, hey, making a couple adjustments and making something their own is actually just as valuable for some of these teams.
I thought they played to their strengths pretty heavily, just with this comp, and I actually thought that the Shadow Priest was... I think that the Shadow Priest and the Moonkin, I would say, aren't the best picks for like how you want to do like an MDI-style dungeon, but I thought that they made it work really well, especially the Shadow Priest like running the Surrender of Madness and the Night Fae Covenant. Wait, we didn't see Doppler die to Surrender to Madness once. Like that's like an important thing to note. Is like he was running Surrender for more Void Form uptime and more damage. We didn't see him die to Surrender one time, and like that's actually just an important takeaway. Is like he was playing really well, when they use his cooldowns. And then they of course were using the Hollow and the Convoke to be able to just like burn bosses. So they were playing to their strengths pretty heavily. There definitely is some limitations for what the comp can do, but they pulled around what made their comp good, and that was what made their time so competitive. And they actually, so they improved their time trial time by like a lot. Their time trial time was 27:28. We didn't see the end of that run. I would assume they would have gotten like a 23:30, 23:40, something like that, right? So really big ups in terms of like time gain. I thought that they played to their compositional strengths really well. I'm excited to see what they do in the Spires of Ascension next map.
Yeah, and like I was just about to say, good transition on that one. We got Spires coming up next, Fortified, Bursting, Volcanic, and again, how well are these teams going to say adopt some of the Echo strategies here, Dranos? How well are they going to be able to start again looking to make things their own? And I'm not really convinced if they bring the Holy Pally back for this dungeon, but I'm curious what you think on that one.
Yeah, Holy Paladin, I mean, it looked really strong in the other side. Here in this Fortified dungeon, there's a little bit less of a compelling case, I think, to be made for it. If I was to choose an off-meta healer for this dungeon, I think I would choose the Resto Shaman. There's a lot of ways that Resto Shaman brings some valuable stuff in Spires. We've seen a couple teams use it when it was the time trial dungeon last cup, and I think that could be a consideration here. Nothing wrong, though, with the Discipline Priest as well. Discipline Priest, such a great pick for the ability that it brings to buff up the mage with that power infusion. I'm curious to see what Reload Fulcrum go with here. We know that they liked their comp we just saw from them out of the other side. They used in their Sanguine Depths time trial as well. We have no idea what their plan is in Spires of Ascension, though.
Yeah, and the more that we're able to kind of get an idea of how some of these other teams are going to be playing, and especially, when we look at how well these 6th, 7th, and 8th seeds, I think in a lot of respects, Nagura, have been putting up such a strong fight, it kind of goes to, NA and EU are, merged together as a region, but it has just gotten to be so competitive as a result of that.
I really like that because, I mean, in the past when we had EU separately from NA, we really had some of these like really one-sided matches where we saw a number 1 seed just completely breeze through a dungeon while a number 8 seed just pulled one by one and was like 10 minutes behind. But now we see, because of those two regions being together, we see even number 8 seeds having a really good chance against those higher seeds as well, and sometimes even upsetting them, like for example, Golden Guardians being knocked out very, very early on last time around, even though they got the number 2 or number 1 seed almost every single time before. So it's really nice to see those lower seeded teams do so well against these veteran teams because of this mix of regions now.
Yeah, and you know, when it becomes, I think also having a fairly low dungeon pool at the beginning of the expansion titles, where you're looking at everybody's experienced these all at the same time. A lot of teams have had time to play all of them throughout beta, and there's no map ban, so it's more about you're practicing most for what you think your route throughout the bracket's really going to be looking for.
Yeah, and I mean, for what it's worth, Obey Alliance had to play Spires of Ascension a lot of times last weekend.
Yeah.
They had it as a time trial map, and they played it like 2 or 3 times going into the weekend, so they played it a lot. And we've seen a lot of Obey Alliance's Spires of Ascension. It's not an easy dungeon. They haven't always had the cleanest runs, but the theoretical maximum for time that we've seen in Spires of Ascension is pretty high from Obey Alliance. So Reload Fulcrum, they're definitely going to have to step up their game here, and they're going to have to prove that DOS wasn't just like a one-off kind of thing.
Yeah, most definitely. Game number 2 right now is ready to get underway as Obey Alliance is up 1 as we go to Spires of Ascension.
All right, so let's see what they're going to be showing here in this dungeon. Let's see if they're also going to be playing a different comp here, because Spires, to be fair, I mean, we've seen a bunch of different strategies in Spires, but it is fairly linear in what you can do because the platforms in this dungeon are there, right? You can't pull more than what a platform provides on trash, so they're just going to have to go with some of those pulls, but we've not seen a single team go left so far, because you can choose to go left or right after the first boss. And I think in fact, all of the teams went right so far. So that's still something we're gonna have to see if one team dares to go to the left. I think the reason why is just because there's too many of the aura mobs that I forgot the name of.
Yeah, the oh gosh, the squad leaders. Aha, squad leaders. I've come
leaders.
up with the name.
There we go. Good job, Tattles.
Had to dig deep and remember what they're called. But yeah, I think that like if they went left, if Reload Fulcrum goes left, that would prove that that would mean that they're not super comfortable with the more mechanically challenging like strategy of going right, dealing with a bunch of Goliaths without having a lot of kicks. And just going with the more meta MDI strategy. However, it's definitely safer, but it's a lot, like you said, there's a pretty big time loss. Where for the side of Obey Alliance, we know that they have experience going right. We know that they have experience being able to deal with like the double Goliath pull with the Praetors and whatnot. I think the biggest crux for these teams is going to probably be like that Hellion Goliath Justicar pull after the second boss. That seemed to be the pull that's gotten a lot of people's number coming into the weekend. That one is a lot of AoE damage. So I think making sure that you're able to do something like that pull, even while you're using the Kyrian Spear, is going to be pretty big watch.
Yeah, definitely have to looking out for those Kyrian Spears and for those bigger pulls, especially also the Angel pull on the last boss platform, where we've seen lots of teams just pull all 3 mini bosses on top of each other using the spear. Some of them using Pride buff, some of them not, but almost all teams committing that Bloodlust. And if that goes wrong, that pull, then it's going to be a huge time loss. And the worst part is it's also at the very end of the dungeon as well, right? So it's going to be such a nail biter, because if you're ahead, you can lose your whole advantage if you don't manage to do this angel pull. So all eyes on that at the very end of the dungeon, but there's still lots of other spots in the dungeon where things can go wrong, as you just mentioned. And yeah, first of all, this initial pull, we see almost all teams pull everything until to the very end, and that can cause some issues. We've seen most teams do it well, but some deaths here and there because of the bursting affix that can cause some issues. If you don't kill them at the very same time, then you don't have the master spell to deal with it from your healer, and then all of a sudden it can cause some trouble. And there we go, we're finally in, we do see the different comp again from Reload Fulcrum. We see the Moonkin and the Hunter and the Mage, so no Windwalker in comparison to Obey Alliance.
I'm interested to see if they're going to have a double Kyrian coming into this comp. Okay, so they have a Kyrian Moonkin, so they do have the ability to be able to carry 2 of those Kyrian armament spears, which is pretty nice. Just in terms of like where you want to use them for MDI style pulls, you really do need double Kyrian. Whereas on the side of Obey Alliance, of course, that Weapons of Order, the Kyrian Monk is a fairly standard pick. Reload Fulcrum has swapped off the Holy Paladin and then swapped to the Discipline Priest. I think that makes sense, especially for like a bursting environment. You get a lot of value out of Master Spell. And yeah, just I think a lot of value out of Master Spell. PI, of course, incredibly strong as well.
Yeah, so Reload Fulcrum using that Bloodlust there on that initial pull while Obey Alliance held onto theirs. Looked like they even wasted some of the uptime of Bloodlust as it was still up when they were flying to the next platform. So maybe, I assume that's why most teams are holding on to the Bloodlust for the first boss, because they're just not getting the full value out of that pull because everything's just dying faster than the Bloodlust duration. Their Hunter dropping incredibly low here, unfortunately, for Reload Fulcrum. Did manage to recover, though, as we do see some Shadowmans coming out, but the tank also dropping really low. Hopefully they can recover. Just this pull can be incredibly dangerous, as they have the Castigator here that just constantly casts that Dark Lash, and they don't have enough interrupts for it because you have to interrupt the Goliath. And the Moonkin, with the triple range lineup, they just have less interrupts, right? Solar Beam, a 1 minute cooldown. It's an AoE silence, which is nice, but if you need to interrupt something like the Goliath, then all of a sudden it can cost you quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly. It really can be scary. I also do think that a big advantage of saving the Bloodlust for the boss is that you're able to double it up in terms of like the damage effective value with the Prideful. So you actually are getting a pretty considerable amount of damage gain out of it. But right here, looks like Reload Fulcrum and Obey Alliance are kind of neck and neck. Obey Alliance does have their Bloodlust, which they'll probably be using here in just a moment to allow Holo to stabilize the group. But they're still holding on to it.
Yeah,
just
why?
waiting for that. They're waiting for the Prideful to die, probably, if I had to guess.
There we go.
Maybe they're saving it
Oh,
for
maybe
next
they're even
dungeon.
saving it for a different pull. I mean, it's
Next
very
dun-
possible that they save it for the bird pull on the right side, maybe, or yeah, interesting that they're not using it here at all. It must mean that they know they're getting a certain amount of Bloodlust throughout the dungeon, so they can just save it for something else, and they feel like they just don't need it for this fight.
I know
yeah,
what they use
very
it for.
interesting.
I remember what they use
Okay.
it for. They use it for the double Goliath Praetor pull. I remember this from
yeah.
from a couple weekends ago. I forgot that they used it there. Yeah, they determined that is their biggest pain point as opposed to just doing something here. Reload Fulcrum though, and Obey Alliance. I would say Obey Alliance has about a 10% damage advantage on the first boss, and of course Obey Alliance does have that Bloodlust advantage that they will be using it momentarily. I'm interested to see where Reload Fulcrum goes with their routing. They did a pretty standard route in DOS. It wasn't anything that was like too out of the ordinary. I'm interested to see if they have practiced up and are able to compete in terms of like top tier routing in Spire's Ascension, because this is one of the dungeons that I think changes the most route wise from like live to MDI kind of realms, where it's like, all right, some of these pulls are really just different in terms of like what you're going to be doing. Reload Fulcrum immediately starts to go to the left side. They're actually grabbing the Skirmisher Ether Diver. It looks like they're grabbing the Skirmisher Ether Diver pack. In addition to those 3 skirmishers on the right. So they're doing a little bit bigger of a pull than what you would traditionally see on live. They dropped that Binding Shot, which is actually pretty big value for them. Where on the side of Obey Alliance, they've pulled all the Stealth Claws with the Praetor. They used the Binding Shot of their own.
Healer going down. I think he released. That's actually not good for them because they did have a Battle Rest available. But
I mean, they released right here.
Oh,
right?
no, there we go. Okay, so he is back. Did manage to get back to the group. But yeah, I think what happened there was that an Ether Diver, the ones that are at the top of the platform, there's some Ether Divers that are at this ledge. And once you pull them, they don't immediately come down to you. And then at some point, they snap to you. And what happened there was that it's actually snapped to the healer because he had aggro, he had healing aggro, and he just died. It looked like it even got one shot by this Ether Diver. So very unfortunate, but did manage to recover as they finish up the pack. And now they're moving on to the right side, while Obey Alliance dealt with the whole thing a little bit differently. They didn't go left at all. They just immediately dealt with this right side, and they're now doing this bigger pull.
Real Fulcrum's Hunter doing the perplex strategy of using Turtle to be able to get all the stealth claws out of stealth, getting all of the rips on them, which is that physical damage bleed, and dealing with them, then able to pull the Praetor. Obey Alliance has now popped their Bloodlust like we were talking about a little bit earlier. They're going to actually proc their Pride as soon as they end up killing this pack, since they are at 34% enemy forces count. So that's a big advantage of using the Bloodlust. It kind of carries over just a little bit into that Pride, and allows you to have a slightly more healing power just dealing with that more often than not. So now they have this Pride to deal with, their 40% Pride, and they will be moving on into the rest of the dungeon momentarily, where, on the side of Reload Fulcrum, they have already procced their 40% Pride. They will deal with it, and then they will do the double Goliath, bunch of Praetor kind of pull with that Prideful buff. So it allows them just a little bit different of cooldown coverage as to where they're going to be getting it, where Obey Alliance, instead of using the Prideful buff to be able to kill the pack, they use a Bloodlust.
Yeah, they're having some issue here as they were already low when the Pride spawned. So I wonder if they're going to be able to deal with that one on Real Fulcrum's side. As the Priest is also looks like he's completely out of mana. Not sure if they have an Innovate available from the Moonkin, but definitely looking really scary as everyone drops incredibly low. The Hunter going down, this might actually be really bad for them. There we go, did manage to finish it off, but yeah, just losing their Hunter there, unfortunate.
Yeah, but okay, so one of the, it is unfortunate, but he can release. It's going to take a few moments to actually get this pack grouped up, so there shouldn't be too much downtime for when he actually makes it to the pack. But on the side of Obey Alliance, they'll just keep chugging. They've pulled the next Praetor pack. They have pulled all these Inquisitors. This Goliath is inside of this pull as well. This is a really scary pull if they don't micromanage their kicks very well, and they don't get like the Praetors and the Goliath down. On the side of Real Fulcrum, it looks like they had a Rebellious Fist go off. Their tank ends up dying.
Yeah.
I think this may be a full wipe for them.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah, just missing one interrupt there. You can see how difficult these pulls are. You have the 2 Goliaths that need to be interrupted, and because of those triple ranged, you just have very limited interrupts, right? The 1 minute cooldown is Solar Beam, and then the tank can interrupt 1 Goliath by himself, but I assume that there was just something going wrong with the interrupt rotation from the ranged DPS, just falling behind, not getting the interrupt off, and it was just too much damage for them to handle. Yeah, just a huge amount of time loss as Obey Alliance, though, on the other hand, having such a clean run. They already procced their 60% Pride at this point. You can see they still have 0 deaths. They have Skirmishers to sit there in the back, so it's possible that they should have melted that one off completely so they don't have to deal with it and just move on. The squad leader, they just skip everything. They don't want to deal with the squad leader at all because it's just a time loss. And now they're just jumping down instead of using the Angel because it doesn't spawn if you don't deal with that trash pack. But as long as you manage to jump more than 50% of the way, the Whirlwind here will actually carry you to the other side. So that's what they're doing here on the Obey Alliance's side.
All right. So looks like they're CCing a bunch of these mobs. I think this is going to be like a pretty standard pull in terms of like what you would normally get in like a live key setting where you're doing just like the squad leader. And then you're going to end up like pulling the rest of this count in a moment to be able to... They're not going to proc their Pride off of this, but they've determined that this is a pack that they enjoy playing, that they think is actually pretty efficient in terms of like what time it's going to give in terms of like the count. Echo, I think, tended to agree while Perplex tended to disagree. So it looks like Obey Alliance is positioning themselves to pull the rest of the trash into the boss. I really like this. I think that this is like a pretty smart
I think they're
play.
resetting? Oh, no, they're not.
I think they're trying to get trying to get all the mobs grouped up because the Praetor's like difficult to move. So they were trying to drag the Praetor across the room using a range to be able to move it because it's not able to cast its Dark Slash if it's too far out of range, or Dark Seeker, whatever it's called. So they're doing a really good job here. I'm worried about this Praetor dashing away from the rest of the group as well, but it's doing a lot of damage to Skylark. Skylark can rotate defensives quite well, being able to deal with all of that. Obey Alliance, I like that pull. We've seen groups a lot of the times do that pull without the boss. I think the adaptation of doing that pull with the boss puts them in a position to where, like, once they start competing against world-class teams, such as like Echo, such as Perplexed, Golden Guardians in a rematch potentially, they have proven that their Spires of Ascension is at least, I would say, is a top-tier route.
I really like this. I'm just seeing that their Hunter 40 is playing Dwarf. So he just used the Dwarf racial to get rid of the bleed effect from Venturax. So this boss actually jumps on a person, on a ranged player, and leaves behind a bleed that does a lot of damage. And because they're pulling a lot of trash on top of this boss, that can cause a lot of issues, right? You have the bursting when the mobs die, you have the other damage coming out. So having that dwarf racial to get rid of that bleed actually helps you out a lot. So really nice thinking here, nice strategy to go with the dwarf, because he doesn't need to be Night Elf, because he just has to feign death anyway, right? So really, really nice to use that extra racial here, getting rid of the bleed effect. And as far as I'm aware, it also works against bursting. I'm not 100% sure, but it does definitely work against the bleed. So that's already nice.
I can't say
I'm not 100%
one
sure
way or
if
the
it
other.
works against bursting.
I know it didn't work against bursting before. I think it should, because it's a magic effect. But I guess I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, we're horde players. We don't know stuff like that. Also, we can't be dwarfs even if you were alliance, right? I mean, we are moonkins.
I need
to
research some more. I guess I'm not totally certain. All right, Real Fulcrum, trying to claw their way back. I think the 7 death differential has really put a damper in terms of like where they are position wise and just how close they are in the dungeon. Obey Alliance grabbing their second javelin. You do see Chompy grabbing that. They will probably use one of them on this next pull that they're about to do with the Hellion, with the Goliath, with all those Justicars. Very dangerous pull. It's important that they don't wipe here, because this could be a monumental point of a lot of time loss if the pull is not done well. However, if it's performed excellently, then they will be totally fine. They'll be cruising through the rest of the dungeon. So they're committing a lot of damage and a lot of abilities here, though. So Skylark, okay, so they're actually setting up this pull a lot different than a lot of other groups. Most other groups actually set up this pull at the top, near that middle area, whereas Obey Alliance is utilizing the stairs to be able to line of sight the mobs in. They're keeping that Justicar and all these mobs just kind of stationary in the middle, and now they're all standing here. Okay, I actually like how they've set this pull up just a little bit more.
You think they might actually be able to see access the black orbs spawning out of these things? I mean, they didn't actually spawn right there, but sometimes if you don't kill them fast enough, you get those orbs spawning. Just like on the spears on the last platform. So maybe they're actually able to Z-access them when they stand on this ledge there, which would also be very smart if that's what they're intended to do. But they did have enough damage and they gathered it up really nicely. Yeah, I definitely agree with you that this is a really cool strategy where they just pull it backwards instead of it being pulled forward like we see most other teams do.
It's just hard to get. Okay, so the issue with pulling forwards is that you have to burn Silent Sigil really early, as opposed to utilization of as opposed to utilization of just line of sight, because there's no like really good spot to line it. I thought that was pretty unique in how they're setting it up. And so now Obey Alliance being really patient with their damage. Oh, okay, look at this. Sigil of Misery comes down on all those mobs, and now Shape combusts, flame striking, doing the most damage he possibly can, doing mage things and padding the meters. Good job from Shape. Really good massive spell.
And then he wasn't even in the... That was like the most typical mage thing I've seen. So putting the Rune of Power away from the group, just combusting, and then not even being in a mass dispel range, you know? It's just like, they're bursting. I mean, it's like, just heal me.
Heal me. I'm not blocking. I'm not in the mass dispel. You can single dispel me, or I'm just going to stand here and complain and blame you. That is the most mage thing. I agree.
I like it. He just asserted his dominance over the healer here after he buffed him with PI. Oh no.
Redeemed mages are not people, please. So Real Fulcrum is going to be downing the second boss here, but it feels like Obey Alliance is firmly in the driver's seat. They're on to Ophirion. Once he does reach 0 energy, he will enter a recharge state, where all of those puddles turn into orbs that get soaked, but he will also take 100% increased damage during the duration of his recharge. Obey Alliance will probably not get 2 recharges if I had to wager a guess. It also looks like they're not electing to pull any trash on top of the boss. We've seen that from different teams as well. Just kind of depends on the strategy and where you need your enemy forces count. I think they just need those non-elites to be able to finish off the rest of their count. So yeah, here's that recharge state. Once he reaches 100 energy again, then he will come out of the recharge and activate back in his phase 1 abilities. But the boss is dead. Like, this boss actually got murdered.
Yeah, that boss is definitely dead. You see Skylark though with those 10 debuffs from soaking the orbs. I want to make sure you still keep him alive because this boss, actually, all of the dots that he gets from this buff still tick even after the boss died. So I still want to make sure that you heal a debuff, but no problem for a Holo as he's used to healing people, especially that mage. Anyway, they're moving on and pulling that trash back together. You do see just the sigil being used, gripping all of them on top of each other, making sure they're using the silence as well. This pack actually pretty dangerous because you do have the 2 Justicars, and then you also have the healers as well, the Menders, which do cast a healing effect. So all of those things need to be interrupted. But problems for Reload Fulcrum as they try to do the same pull as we've just seen Obey Alliance do, and unfortunately just didn't work out for them.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about earlier. That pull, they started getting those black puddles. It's once you start getting those from the Hellion, you know things are not looking super hot. That's unfortunate circumstances coming in for the Reload Fulcrum. They're getting an Inji res on their healer to be able to mass res the rest of the party, but like definitely feels almost too little too late. They would need an absolute catastrophe from Obey Alliance, which, I mean, we're still in catastrophic territory. Obey Alliance has the hardest pull of the dungeon, probably in the game right now. Triple Angel with Bloodlust, with a Kyrian Spear, no Prideful buff, notably.
I really like how angels are carrying people, just somehow like
asserting their dominance over them, carrying them by the nape of their neck.
Exactly, just like a cat would carry its kittens, right? But anyway, they're now gathering up, they're just gearing up for this pull, rather. This pull, as we talked about, incredibly dangerous because you need to kill all of these angels at the very same time. Otherwise, they're going to be healing to full. So you only have a couple of seconds to finish them off. And if you don't have even damage, it can be incredibly dangerous. Not only that, but you also have all 3 special effects from these angels applied to you at the same time. So you have the damage taking increase that is being stacked up. You can see in the debuffs. And then you also have the debuff that is increasing damage, taking damage on you. And the spears being thrown onto you as well. So lots of management here. You can see them just touching around the spears. And you see Holo just trying to keep the group alive while the damage dealers try to kill everything evenly.
I learned how you can tell where the spear is targeting the other day. Do you know how it works?
Yeah, it's on the blade, where the blade is looking, and 90 degrees from the blade in either directions, right?
Exactly. I didn't know that.
Are they
until...
making it? Ooh, there we go.
They got it. Yeah, I didn't know that until recently. 40 dies, but they'll be able to res him up in a second. It's not the most costly casualty.
Did you know that he can also bait the spears? Because depending on where you stand, in comparison to the mini-boss, he will always throw it at you in the same angle, and therefore it will always shoot out in the same angle too. So if you all stack up, all the range, you can all move together, and you can handle it like the debuff from the Pride. Okay. You can just always walk forward in a line.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like relative to the position to the mini-boss.
Yeah, so if you tanked the mini boss at the front of the platform and moved parallel with it, it would always be at the same angle. I see.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Huh. That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's really nice. Anyway, so now that we learned that Obey Alliance is fighting devils now, as Reload Fulcrum just has more issues, unfortunately, that's going to be a full team wipe for them. At this point, I mean, they know they're so far behind, so they probably just tried to do some Hail Mary pull, and it just didn't work out for them. And you can't blame them for trying something if they know they're so behind, and this is the last chance for them to stay in this tournament, right? This is an elimination game, so knowing that Obey Alliance already pulled Devils, they had to try something crazy. Didn't work out for them, unfortunately, but definitely still... really well done by them, especially this first game in the other side that they almost pulled off. So it's really, really well done. But Obey Alliance just too clean in this run. They actually have a very impressive Spires route. Like, I really, really like their strategy, and that was incredibly difficult for Reload Fulcrum to beat. Even if they would have played perfectly with zero mistakes, it would have been hard.
Earlier today, let's give some context. Earlier today, Echo played Spires of Ascension versus Golden Guardians. Echo did this dungeon in 19 minutes and 12 seconds with 3 deaths. Obey Alliance looks like they'll probably end up finishing this dungeon right at the 21-minute mark. So there's definitely still some time that they could potentially be saving, but I don't know exactly where it would be. I think I do know where it is. Echo pulls
after the third boss, right?
It's after the third boss. Obey Alliance did that 1 4-pack, whereas Echo did that 4-pack with the Kyrian Spear. If Echo,
exactly, I think that saves them a lot of time on top of the boss too, right? They pulled it on top of the boss, no?
So Perplex does it on top of the boss.
Oh,
Echo just
true.
did it. Echo did it with the Kyrian Spear.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different. But
you mean with the
Obey
mini
Alliance
boss
lost
as
a lot of
well?
time.
You mean that they speared it with the mini boss? Oh, so they pulled 3 packs while Obey Alliance only pulled 2. Okay. Yeah, okay, that makes the pull definitely a lot more worth it if you have 3 packs on top of the spear, yeah. Because it really took Obey Alliance quite a lot to kill off those 4 trash mobs after that boss. But so definitely still some time they can save compared to other teams. But they win against Reload Fulcrum here, 2-0, and Reload Fulcrum unfortunately going to be eliminated, but still very well done. But Obey Alliance are going to be the ones moving on.
Obey Alliance taking that win, kind of just further establishing where they want to be able to stand throughout this tournament as they 2-0 Reload Fulcrum and move on throughout that lower bracket. So well played there by Obey Alliance in a lot of respects here, Dranos.